What sparked Brian's interest to writing was fiction pieces, but something about journalism was much more appealing.
Well, I wanted to be a novelist. That was the plan. And the thing about writing a novel is you got to make up a lot of stuff. And so when I was in college, I took a feature writing course with a Jesuit priest named Raymond Schroth, who still is alive and writing, and he writes for America magazine now, this Jesuit magazine. And what I discovered very quickly about journalism was that you don't have to make anything up. You've got your dialogue and your characters and your setting and your storyline, and sometimes even your resolution, your conflict and your resolution, your tension and release, all of it's right there. And what you do is tell these real stories. And fiction can be a powerful tool for understanding the human condition and life on this planet. But geez, what's more real than good journalism?
Journalism is certainly not an easy job. Like any other job, there's a system or process on how to get the job done. Brian has a way of talking to people and sharing information, and that's part of his process.
Well, you have to talk to a lot of people. You have to know a lot of people. You have to be interested in what they're doing, and you have to get them to tell you things. Sometimes in journalism, reporters say, you like to get people on your payroll. And by that, it's just people who tell you things. I'm a conduit of information. When I walk down Elm Street, I talk to 25 or 30 people, and I'll tell them a couple things, they'll tell me a couple of things. It's just the way it happens when you live in a city, and you bump into people on the street and you pass information back and forth. And that goes for news as well as culture. You want people on city staff to tell you when something's crooked is going on in there, but also you want people in bands or artists or people who work in that cultural scene to let you know what's going on in that area too, because culture is, news is just a kind of culture. Crime, sports, they're all just a kind of culture.
He's been writing for 20 years for various papers and always picked something up along the way. He learned something at every step and every job.
My very first job, actually, I went back to New York for about 6 months, and I worked on the sports news wire for a company called Sports Ticker, and I was basically a stat clerk. I would get updates from baseball and basketball and football games, pop them into the wire and send it out. And you learn about accuracy, and the importance of accuracy. I made a huge mistake at that job. Every time someone hit a home run, you made an update and put it out on the wire. And Juan Samuel, who I believe was a Kansas City Royal, hit a home run. But the way I entered it, somewhere between what the reporter at the game said to me over the phone, I heard Wells as a last name. And the way the database works, I typed in the last name Wells, and what I did was I sent out a report saying that David Wells, an American League pitcher, had hit a home run. Not that David Wells isn't capable of hitting a home run every now and then, although he used that little tiny bat, remember? But yeah, American League pitchers don't bat. And that's an accuracy thing, and accuracy is, well, that's what journalism is all about. Accurate information. It's supposed to make you smarter. I worked at the News and Record. I worked for a magazine called Triad Style. I got hired by Jerry Rowe, who's a columnist over there now, but he was my editor here. And I was a nightlife columnist for them. Now, I was a bartender for many years, and I used to spend a lot of time. I was a bartender here and in New Orleans and in New York, and so I knew a lot about that scene, that culture, and that business. So I would go out and do stories about nightlife. And I made a lot of connections, of course, when I was doing that. I did that for a few years. And daily newspapers are a little different than the alternative press, but this was a pretty cool little paper. And just being able to write a column every week. And I wrote a column in college, and I've always liked column writing. But the discipline of writing a column, they say writing a column is like being married to a nymphomaniac. The first couple weeks are fantastic, but after a while, you're just like, well, again? and you just get to it, but you have to write that column. The column's coming out every week, and the discipline, rain or shine, no matter what, you're putting that 800 words out there, and it's going out. Yes Weekly, I learned everything over there. I mean, I learned how to be an editor, how to run a staff, how to do a payroll, how to make a conception for a cover story, how it all comes together. I mean, that was the most important job I've ever had.